Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math and Spider-Man 1, 2, and Miles Morales. So I've been enjoying Spider-Man 2 recently. I just finished it. It was an incredible game, and I wanted to talk about that is the focal point for like the combat and all that good stuff, but also talk about the first Spider-Man and also Spider-Man Miles Morales. So I want to talk about all these games and how things have like built up over time and just like how much fun I had and how math is used along the way. Spider-Man is an interesting character. Superhero, sure, but superhero with a heavy nemesis. Focus on STEM. Where'd I get STEMisis from? I'm rolling with it though, okay? I'm rolling with it. STEMisis. I guess I fused focus and STEM somehow, some way, in some combo or another. But yeah, so Spider Man is a very STEM focused superhero, right? So it's not a far jump to see how math factors into his world and his adventures. But what I also think is interesting is that Spider-Man, sure, is very STEM focused, but also very creative. I mean, like anywhere from his outfit to his web shooters or any of the gadgets that he has invented, right? And I think it's cool to see that combination. And over the years, we've had a lot of interesting Spider-Man games out there. And what's crazy is so I've been playing Spider-Man games for like 30 years or so at this point, which is insane. But I bring it up because it's just like it dawned on me because like I think the first game that I played that was Spider-Man game was like Spider-Man and Venom, Maximum Carnage. Like that's a crazy game. What a killer theme. you know, Let me know if you played that. I don't always hear people talk about it, but it was an interesting game. So that's how it started for me. And there's been several Spider-Man games since. There's still some that I haven't played out there, but I've played a good deal of them, and it's been interesting to see how web slinging has evolved over the games, and just fleshing out those worlds. I mean, there's been some good Spider-Man games and not so good Spider-Man games, but they've all had something interesting, at least for me. And with the Insomniac Spider-Man games, they have been stellar, just incredible. So I want to talk about that a bit more in this like a video. I will talk about some plot points later in the video, but like I'll indicate that I'm about to like go into spoiler territory. But if you wanted to play it safe even before I got to that point, and in case I forget, I get it, right? If you don't want any spoilers for any of those games, I get it. But if you've played those games or you don't care about spoilers, feel free to stick around. And so yeah, assume that there are spoilers ahead. Spoilers for Spider-Man, Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Spider-Man 2 for the Sony games, like the Insomniac games, or Marvel Spider-Man. I get why they do it, but it's just like, but I digress. So assume that there will be massive spoilers ahead, just in case, because I'm not going to hold back. Um, so let's get into it proper. So I'm going to focus on combat in Spider-Man 2 and branch out and then talk about the other games as well as a consequence of that. So like I said, spoilers ahead. And one thing that I wanted to say that's a light spoiler, even compared to some of the stuff that I might say later, is that one of the first things in the game is that Peter is a teacher and Miles is teacher, which is very fitting, right? And he is teaching physics, and his focus in what he studies is biophysics, which also feels fitting. So one of the things that he teaches them right off the jump is surface tension, which he jumped in it, he went there. But he explains what surface tension is. He shows the equation for it, And so I thought that was cool. And the actual title for that first section is called Surface Tension. And so right off the bat, you're seeing like the math and having that concept explain, the math, the physics of it. And then you get to put it into action because you have that idea of surface tension come into play when you're in the water, like when you land on the water. Throughout the game, and you get to see that pretty early on because if you land, there's a brief moment where you can jump off of the water, making use of that concept in some crazy ways, and I think that's pretty cool. And you have the web wings, which we'll get to, but you can kind of like make use of that, and then be back up in the air, glide, hit the water again, and then do that, and repeat it, kind of just like skipping around. If you didn't have any like place to swing on to. Also, I always like that. I'm getting distracted. But okay, so I bring that up though because it's like one of the things with math is that it's everywhere. It's in everything, right? And when we're talking about math and academic sense, math and how it's used in the sciences, math and how we typically think of it, when we're talking about those things, we're talking about the language of it. We're trying to communicate an idea. We're trying to say something about the past, the present, the future, the world, ourselves. And that's one fraction, right? Or sorry, it's a fraction of a much larger whole. Because math is not just what we're talking about. It's not just the equations. It's everything behind those things, right? It's what the universe is doing, how it functions, how it flows. It's what it is. It's what it's doing all the time. And so I think starting off by explaining surface tension is cool, and showing the equation is cool, but showing an example of where you get to explore that concept a bit is even cooler. And I think that's awesome. And so that being said, I wanted to expand and talk about the combat a bit more, and then kind of talk about like exploration as far as the city is concerned, and then talk about other elements of the game, how math is used along the way, and just have some fun with it. So with the fighting, the combat, it's top notch. So you have the basic idea of combat, right? You're trying to take damage. Sorry, no. you're, you're trying to dish out damage while not trying to take damage. And there are different ways to explore that. You can stay on the offensive, sure, but like with a lot of these fights in Spider-Man, the idea is like, yeah, you want to do that, but you also want to be able to evade. And in the case of this game, you can actually parry as well, but we'll get to that. So you have that basic idea of like, hey, I'm attacking this opponent, or these groups of opponents, and I'm trying to not take damage. And so there's math in that basic idea, right? Like you have your health, they have theirs, and we're both starting off at 100%, and you're trying to whittle theirs down to zero while they're trying to do the same to you. And then when you're actually fighting, how do you dish out that damage, right? You have your basic attacks, but then there's a lot of other things that come with that in this game. There's now nuance and complexity. Like one of the big things is combos, right? Like you have like this fluidity to your combos, and it's like, yeah, you want to like take it to your opponents, but they're coming at you from all these different angles, and so you want to be able to evade, you want to be able to parry, and you want to be able to hit hard and fast and recover if you need to. And there's math in that, math in the movements, math in the animations, math in the combos themselves, the timing, how many buttons you have to press to get off a combo. And in this case, not only do you have your regular melee attacks, but you're throwing your webs in there. And in the case of Miles, you're able to do some things with your lightning. So you have your basic stuff, right? But that's not all. As you're fighting, you have a focus gauge, like under your health gauge, because you have your health gauge and you want to monitor that. With your focus gauge, you start off with one, but you can get more as the game progresses. And with that focus gauge, you can use it to either heal yourself, or you can use that to have a finisher, and use that against an opponent. You got to decide what you want to do in the situation, right? If your health is low, I would definitely recommend using, that. But if it's a tough opponent, maybe you want to do that finisher and worry about the health later. I don't know. That's up to you. But my point is, there's some options, and you can start to see how things expand. And here's the thing, right? Like you have the combat. on the surface, but you have Miles and Peter, and you have skill trees. Is you're fighting your opponents, and you're gaining experience, and you're leveling up. You're gaining skill points, and you use those skill points to increase your abilities, increase your speed, increase the different tactics at your display. Disposal, which is useful, right? And it's like it's all math to tell a narrative, math to explore a game, and it's like as you're growing, Peter and Miles are growing. And the other thing is like right, you're collecting different items throughout the game that you can use to power up your suit as well as collect more suits and unlock them. So it's just like there's so much motivation to go around, do side quests, take out your opponents and all that stuff. And there's different things that unfold over the course of the game. Like they're the EMF missions where you're doing different things that like benefit the city. But of course, you build up experience and you get more items as a result. And that's just one example, right? Like as you're going through, you gain more experience that you can use to power up your gear and power up the Spider-Man. But also you're unlocking different things about the story, different things about that world. In some cases, you're getting different items, or some cases like fulfilling a certain set of like side quests will get you a different suit and things like that. And it's just like it's math just all across the way. And so it's like not only is there math in that basic combat, but it gets a little bit more complicated too because you have the idea of using abilities. So you have four abilities for Miles, four abilities for Peter to start with that you can use. And it's like as you fight your opponents, they build back up and just power back up over time. So you have to be strategic how you use them, but they're typically hard hitting and deal some damage, and you can figure out what you want to do in a given situation. Now, as you go on, Miles gets some upgrades to his attacks, and you can swap out those other abilities for more powerful sort of abilities. And so he's progressing in the game in that sense. With Peter, he gets more power. Or different types of abilities when he is the symbiote, and then later on when he's anti-venom. um so there's that. And they change over time, they grow. And what's really cool and kind of a callback to the earlier games is that like so Peter and Miles both start off strong. There's a lot that they can do. And it kind of is a nice callback to the previous games because you see some abilities show up, abilities that you had to gain um, when you were doing those other games. So it's just like in this game, you're building up experience and you're doing this, you're doing that, and you're gaining these abilities. But it's kind of like you were doing the same thing in the other games, and even though you're not carrying those levels over with you, you're carrying over the abilities that you learned. It's a cool way to look at that, and I like it. And then they just get stronger and faster over time. And with the suit tech, it allows you to power up things like your health and sorry, your health, your damage, your focus, and your traversal. It allows you to power up all those things, and you can also power up your gadgets. And with the gadgets, you can do different things with them. Power them up, increase their capacity. There's a lot of options that you can explore. And now, with those gadgets, using them in combat can get interesting because like you get a limited amount of them at any given time, and you can refill them as you're going on. But doing this, doing that, and so you have to be strategic, and you can increase their capacity as you go on. But there's some good ones, like there's some a concussion grenade that can turn into a sonic concussion grenade. There's like the one that shoots electricity, one that kind of pulls everything in with the web. And speaking of web, that's a pretty cool thing too because there's math all all the way with that. So they are pretty liberal in the sense that you can swing in battle and outside, and it's not an issue with that, right? But there are the more specific ones where you're using your web shooters to like hit the opponents, and you have a limited quantity of those, but that can increase in the game, and you can also actually regain health using that if you power up enough. And so it's just like there's a lot to the combat because you have your attacks, but with those attacks, you have your basic attacks, you have your abilities, you have your gadgets, and all the while, you're jumping or evading or parrying and keeping an eye on your opponents. And you have to be aware of where the Spider-Men are, you have to be aware of where they're at. So there's a lot going on in that scenario for you, you might just be like, hey, I'm punching this person, I'm kicking this person, I'm swinging here, I'm swinging there. And it's like, but it's math, math all across the board, math and the motions, the speed, the distance, monitoring your opponents, monitoring your health, their health, your abilities, your gadgets, all these different things. And meanwhile, you're building up your skills, you're building up your gadgets, you're building up your overall character through the suit tech, and it's fun. It's a good time. And with the web slinging in general, there's math in that across the board, right? Math in the webs, how long they are, how like thick, uh, the speed that you're using them as you're zipping through the city, the idea that you're building up momentum, and how they just work on a physical level. And that's really cool. And there's also tricks that you can do with the web. But you can gain some experience for doing some of those tricks while you're flipping through the air. And I think that's cool. And how you use them in combat. And just when you think about it on the larger thing, it's just like, they had to construct the webs like within universe and, decide not only like how dense they are and how long they can go out, but also how to control them, how strong they are, and so many other things. And there's a lot of like you know physics and engineering and chemistry involved in that, and just math across the board. And you like to see it. And because Spider-Man is a very STEM based character, like I said, you can see a lot of the math in ways that you don't always get to see, even if it's there with other characters. And the thing about Spider-Man is like he has a lot of science based villains, and you can see like in the games a bunch of like things on the boards and stuff like that, where you can see the math play out. But I like seeing like the physical results of that math as well. And so I think that's really cool. And so here, just like focusing on that combat, there's just so much more that you could talk about. But the idea is it's a basic principle: dish out damage while not taking it. But there's so much layers to it, just with attacking, but also evading and parrying and jumping out of the way, but also with the gadget use and the ability use and just gaining skill points and how you use them and building up the Spider-Man throughout the game. And then there's so many other things that you can say, and I encourage you to discuss them. But my point is, like, whether we're talking about the universe itself, the gameplay, or the Spider-Man, there's a lot of math at play, and I think it's easier to see with Spider-Man than it is for some other characters, and it's easier to see in gaming, than some other things, right? Because gaming is very math oriented. This is like this perfect union of math and art, two things that I don't think you can actually divorce. And so it's like in gaming, I think it's interesting because you can see it play out in the gameplay. You can see it play out in the design. Everything is so deliberate, so careful, so calculated. And then on top of all of that, right? Like you are growing as your characters grow. You know, like gaming is such a unique experience, and it's like such a perfect opportunity to practice and build empathy in an interactive way. Like you're growing as your character is growing, you're doing these missions, these side quests, collecting this item, that item, and you're powering up as they're powering up. You're doing what they're doing, they're doing what you're doing. And so I think that's really cool. And a lot of the times you see this through math, right? You can see the skills grow. You can see the amount of items grow. You can see the way your gadgets grow, the way these characters grow, these new abilities that get added, and how you effectively use them. And I think that's all amazing. And so, with that in mind, I want to switch gears and I want to talk about how I feel about Spider Man 2, Spider Man Miles Morales, and Spider Man. I don't know why I went in reverse order, but here we are. So, for starters, I enjoyed the first Spider-Man. I felt like they came out swinging. Like I've played several Insomniac games over the years, and while I wasn't super skeptical that they would do a good job, I was curious to see what they were gonna do. And the cool part about Spider-Man is there's so much to work on in general with the basic concept, but also with how it's evolved over time. You know, how you approach web slinging, how you approach combat. And so I feel like they took a lot of things that worked about Spider-Man over the years and they were able to build something off of that, make it their own. And so I think it was well constructed right from the jump. And, a lot of things that I mentioned about Spider-Man 2, it was applicable to Spider-Man. But you have less because you were in a different spot. But it's just like it was a very complete game. It's just like, hey, they actually upped it. In Spider-Man Miles Morales and in Spider-Man 2. But it was an interesting game, and I wanted to focus on like what I was thinking about playing. I was digging it because you had the Sinister Six element, you had Mr. Negative and all that, and you kind of had things brought together by the end. And also, it features one of my favorite Spider-Man tropes that I don't feel like gets enough attention. The idea that people know that Peter is Spider-Man and have known, and he doesn't know that they know. I like that because, like, in the game, there's like several characters like Aunt May and Doc Ock, that knew Peter was Spider-Man but didn't tell him, and he's just like shocked when they knew, and it was kind of funny when that happened, right? But it's just like, and it was hard to see, like, and sometimes too, you know what I mean? But I like that trope because, like, yeah, Peter, you're not hiding this very well. I just like that it's kind of like people were like, we know you're Spider Man, but we're gonna let you keep on thinking that we don't know. We don't think you can handle that we know. So I like that, but like seriously though, it was great. And then I enjoyed the main game, but I also enjoyed the like DLC, especially like the gang war stuff. Like that got crazy. It was awesome. And then like with Spider-Man Miles Morales, that game, whew, awesome game. And it hit me hard, like the stuff with Finn, because it's like, and I liked it because like it built off of what worked for Spider-Man while also allowing Miles to, feel pretty unique, partially because of his like electric powers, but also in the way that he moves, the way he functions, the way that he interacts with the people in his life. It was an excellent game. And so it's like it was good to play that. And at the time I didn't have a PS5, so it was nice that I could get it on the PS4 as well. And so it's like or nice that they put it out on PS4. Um, so I got to play that and I dug it. I dug it hard. It was fun to see what like Miles grow, and like I said, fun to see how he differed from Peter in this universe. Um, and the stuff with Finn, and that was rough. Especially with the ending. I was like, oh come on, game. Why you got to do it to me? And then with Spider-Man 2, it's just like I had fun because like I enjoyed the characterizations that I had seen so far. Miles and Peter in this universe are great, and I liked MJ as well. I know not everyone does, but whatever. I That's probably my favorite version of MJ. I like how like Spider Team overall is used. Like Haley is awesome. Genki, I don't feel like you get to really know Genki, but you know enough about him between the games, and he's useful. And in this game, it was kind of fun because it's like you see Harry come back into the picture. You knew he was in the game. You knew where things are kind of leading, but it was like great to see how he interacted with Peter and interacted with MJ, um, and just seeing how that unfolds. It was like crazy. And meanwhile, you have Miles's journey, and you have Peter and Miles, interacting at different points, because they work together. But it's just like nice that they could have their own journeys while having a journey that came together throughout, right? Because they have their journey together, their journey with a spider team, all that good stuff, and then their separate journeys kind of as well. And you get to just go around, and doing things, doing Spider-Man things, Spideying it up, and I think that's awesome. And I had a blast. And also a special shout out. There's a mission where you're getting some stolen art from a museum, and when you go and you visit the museum later, they have like some pretty cool figures throughout history. Some of which were important to the Harlem Renaissance, and they have my boy Langston Hughes in there, and I think that's awesome. So it was kind of cool because there was a few characters that were made up in that, but most of them were real. And it's like, what? Yeah. So I think that was cool. And I had fun with that game, and I liked seeing how everything turned out, and the growth felt good. And I think it's just crazy because the first Spider-Man was really good. They came in there swinging. Like I said, I played a lot of Insomniac games, but like I hadn't seen what they would do with Spider-Man until, of course, it happened. So I wasn't skeptical. They're an excellent company. I was curious to see what they do with it, and they freaking killed it. Like that game gets all the hype for all the right reasons. And Spider-Man Miles Morales and Spider-Man 2, you could say the same. So I think what's interesting to me is that you can take Spider-Man, you can have all these things built up, you can have this stellar game, then you can have Spider-Man Miles Morales come along, and you can take what worked about that, but you have a unique experience where you're playing as Miles, and you can have them knock it out of the park with that. And so you have these two awesome games, one focused on Peter, one focused on Miles, and then they come together in Spider-Man 2, and that's awesome. And I enjoyed the villains in those first two games. Maybe not as much in the third. The stuff was still fun, but I'm not a Craven fan at all. No iteration. And before someone says like, "Oh well, what about Craven's Last Hunt?" No, that did not change my mind. But Venom is always cool. So there's that. And besides, like even if I don't like Craven, I like fighting like the hunters and stuff like that. It's just like I think like that Finn was a good villain, and like Mr. Negative and Sinister Six were a good one in the first one. With Craven, it's just like it wasn't as personal as some of the other villains. None of the Venom stuff was, and it was just crazy because it's just like, there's different characters you're playing through the game, right? Of course, you're playing as Peter and Miles, but there's some segments where you play as MJ like you did in the first one, and you could play as Miles in that one too. You just didn't have the spider powers yet, so you play as Peter, you play as Miles. There's points where you play as MJ, but one point where you played as Haley, and then there's one point where you play as Harry when he's Venom, and it's just that was a crazy scene, crazy element of the game. Just playing that way. But my whole thing is just like there's a lot in these games, and what's crazy though about Spider-Man 2 is like I beat it in like 10 days, and that is not a short game. But it's just like I spent some time on those last 2 weekends. Like I've been able to game a little bit more than I have been in a while, um, and that's saying something because I game a lot. But 10 days I beat that game in like 60 hours. So it was a lot of gaming. It flew by. Also I really dug it. So yeah. So far we have three excellent Spider-Man games, and we know that there's going to be a fourth. At least that's the idea, unless something goes horribly wrong. With that in mind, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed those games if you've played them. I hope you enjoy Spider Man in general. Yeah, I'll see you in the future.